Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the protein piece, because I feel like a lot of people get misaligned. And, when I talk to women or to men about plating food and focusing first on animal-based protein and whether or not there's healthy fats, if you're having a ribeye, you've got your fats in check. If you're having a piece of filet, you might want to add some fats maybe to your salad, but really understanding that protein is the focus. And especially for people that are north of 40 years old, when we talk about how peak bone and muscle mass is in our 20s and 30s, sarcopenia is not an if, but when. It will happen. You will lose muscle mass unless you are aggressively consuming adequate, predominantly animal-based protein and lifting and doing strength training and then getting proper amounts of sleep. This becomes oftentimes the way that I'm able to get a lot of my patients to start focusing on animal-based protein, or at least protein being a protein-centric plated food, because they've been so fearful. They don't know how to put their meals together, because everything that they were taught, whether it's My Plate or the USDA food guide pyramid, everything that we're talking about is so far away from what they've learned that there's a degree of cognitive dissonance that can be challenging. Anna, have you found that to be the case with your patients, that there's a lot of rewriting their internal narrative about food?
Oh my gosh, especially, the concept of healthy fats, and fats are very critical for hormone balancing. And, having gone to high school and college in the 80s, that low fat movement was, we were inundated in that. And so I find it hard for women to shift into making sure that we're getting enough healthy fat. I think that's a really critical piece. And the protein, and Thomas, you said it so well, because the protein is key for longevity. I mean, it really is key for longevity and our quality of life, and especially as women. And we've got to take that in. And often that's one of the areas we skimp, and we think, okay, the big green salad, and let me just have, a couple ounces of this protein, the steak or whatever it may be. And that's where we make a mistake. And that's where our hormones suffer. And we can really affect our immune system. We can really affect our, certainly our longevity. I always think of aging, right? I always think of how are we aging gracefully? How are we going to have the memory and a good mood and quality relationships as we age? But the low fat, that whole low fat brainwashing was destructive to our hormones. I find that's the biggest area I have in working with clients, that I have to reintroduce and emphasize the importance and critical importance of healthy quality fats.
Yeah, I would add to that for sure. A lot of a dogma around the low fat. There's a lot of things we need to unlearn. And the protein is now part of that, especially when those individuals start studying like mTOR versus autophagy. And then we get afraid of this mTOR causing cancer, being anabolic, which it can if you're always in mTOR, and protein activates mTOR, so does high glucose. But if you're able to balance out the fasting with the feasting and getting enough protein in the feasting, you get the best of both worlds there, especially when you're doing it with training, because you get autophagy through exercise as well. When I go through like an audit with my Keto Camp Academy students and I look, all right, you're having a plateau, you're having a stall, let's see what you're eating. And 80% plus of the time they're under eating protein and overdoing it with the fats, to your point, Thomas. So I tell them, let's get the butter out of the coffee. Let's get the MC2 out of there. And like Cynthia said, just have the natural protein that is occurring, the natural fat that's occurring with the protein. And that almost always works to get them through that. And they feel so much better. But it's the things that we need to unlearn, because we've been inundated with all these messages, whether it's the mainstream message or just too extreme in one message in the holistic space. So one of my favorite quotes is from Alvin Toffler, and he said, "The illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and then relearn." The great thing about you, Cynthia, Anna, and Thomas, you're always learning. And if you feel like, okay, I don't think this is working anymore, or research has changed, you're unlearning and then relearning. The majority of people don't have that process. And to that quote, that is literally the illiterate of the 21st century. So we need to make sure we don't put ourselves in this box. And if we find ourselves in this box, unlearn and then relearn and see what's best for our unique individual needs.
I think that's really important and I teach my children this, who are now teenagers, so they understand this, that I'm a lifelong learner. I will continue to evolve, shift, and change throughout my lifetime. And as I learn things, I like to share them with others. That's why I love opportunities to share the beautiful work that each one of you are doing with this community, as well as, being a podcast host. I think that's one of my favorite things that I do. Now, I think one other tail end, like dovetail comment I want to make about protein and, maintaining muscle is that I want everyone to think about muscle as metabolic currency, that muscle is the organ of longevity. Thank you, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, for opening my eyes about that. But really understanding that the more muscle mass we maintain, the more metabolically flexible we will be, the more insulin sensitive we will be. And we know that as we get older and things we're exposed to, we've kind of alluded to, things we're exposed to our environment, our personal care products, our food can expose us to chemicals that can adversely impact hormone balance in the body, even if we're eating pristinely. So I think it's just important to also mention that we want to maintain our metabolic health. And one of the ways that we do that is to eat enough protein and make sure we're working diligently at maintaining the muscle mass we have, and that we don't start losing it. I always think of the example, I worked in cardiology for 16 years as an NP, and nothing was more sad to me than seeing someone who was cognitively very, very sharp and astute, but their body was starting to really break down. Maybe they were even 50 or 60 years old, and they could barely get up out of bed in the hospital.